It's always been, I mean, none of the countries in the neighborhood, in the region who have Kurdish population would like to see an autonomous or some sort of structures where Kurds enjoy full rights. Iraqi Kurds are one example that are not only their security and their stability has been threatened by Iran, but also by Turkey. Turkey, with a huge population, feels very threatened by stable Iraq, and as well as, I mean, stable Iraq may be in the best interest of Turkey, but a stable Iraq with a centralist government that can actually control its population, just like the Saddam era. But right now, Iranians have infiltrated the Iraqi political structures because Iraqi Kurds really are very do not have a lot of option in terms of friends, because you have a lot of a huge area of borders that actually runs across through Iranian Kurdistan, which is part of Iran. So you have to be you have really no choice, and the Iranian government makes sure that Iraqi Kurdistan and Iraq in general is not used as a spot or as a place for insurgency or for resistance movements. Like, for example, our organization used to be based in the border areas, and because of the Iranian government and the pressure from the Iraqi Kurds, we were forced to be relocated, all our camps and areas to the heart of Iraqi Kurdistan, to kind of prevent our activities or our cross-border activities. And as is the case for Mujahideen, who are threatened to remove from Iraq, the case applies to us, where we are forced. I mean, the Iraqi Kurds do not want to go that far and listen to Iran, but also we've been very accommodating to Iraqi Kurds, making sure that we do not create such a situation where Iran can actually pressure them further. And so that's why there's no military activity whatsoever from us into the Iranian borders, because we think that it's destabilizing. But Iran still infiltrated the institutions and make sure that that area is not going towards some sort of structures where the Iranian Kurds would actually think of it. And right now, Iran is very worried of the fact that Kurds in Iran are looking upon to the Kurds of Iraq, who have a president, who have their own prime minister and their own parliament, and the Kurds of Iran want the same thing, and Iran is very worried of that. And definitely, yes, they are working very hard to make sure that doesn't succeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That runs out the clock on that particular question. Mr. Weston, please. And this will be the last questioner today. Thank you.
Mr. Behruz, it's been often said that evil occurs when good men do nothing, and you are doing something, and I congratulate you on your courage and your effort in being here. I think it's fair to say that 308 members of Parliament stand with you in your concern for human rights, and I'm pleased to be one of those. I'd like to follow up on the questions of Ms. Lack, actually. She was getting to the practical issues, and I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The context is that, number one, for instance, in my in West Vancouver, there is arguably the highest concentration of Persian Canadians and a lot of people who would sympathize with you. I had the honor of being on a podium with Nazanin Afshinjam just a few days ago, where we talked about the rights of people in Iran and how she's doing something. A Canadian of Persian background who, like you, is doing something. But we don't have ambassadors between the countries. We have a very narrowly constrained series of issues we can talk about. So here are my 3 questions. Firstly, what can we do to not offend the Persian Canadians in Canada? 300,000 people. Every time we condemn the government of Iran in the House of Commons, people here, they're being condemned just because they're of Persian background. Number 2, what can we do to empower people like you and Nazanin to speak out? Because you're the most powerful Canadians, you of Persian background, who understand it, who've breathed it, who've seen the suffering yourselves. What can we do to help you? And number 3, if you were Minister of Foreign Affairs, what 2 things would you do differently?
Well, first, we're starting with the first question, whether condemning actually will result in being offended. As I said, there's some sort of resentment from the Persian background community for accommodating the ethnic minorities' rights within Iran, and that's what we're working for, making sure that their understanding is, or their interpretation of our policies and our activities is that we do not want to separate and really really separate from Iran, and none of the ethnic minorities are actually working towards that. And this is one of the fears that Iranian, because of the Persians, because of their historical dominancy and their empire and the territories that have lost within the years and within the centuries, they're quite suspicious of our activities. And we always want to make sure that to tell them that really by the policies that have been enacted, by the policies that have been adopted by both the previous regime and this regime, and as well as a lot of Persians, really the threat of disintegration in Iran is much greater than if we really come together and say, this is what you want and this is what we'll give you. I think people in Iran, especially the ethnic minorities, would be much more happier in an Iran that accommodates everybody, and they're they will be less inclined to resort to other acts of, like, other means, especially violent means, to really separate from the country if they are happy, if they're accommodated. And I think the Persian community must understand in Iran and as well as in Canada that really condemning human rights violation in Iran does not really mean supporting secession and separatism by anyone, because first of all, I think maybe sometimes referring to territorial integrity of Iran, especially if you condemn human rights violation of Kurds in Iran, it's probably best to refer to the territorial integrity of Iran, which sometimes pleases the Persian community, that yes, we are worried about activities like this, but at the same time it must be addressed and it must be respected. And I think that might ease their tension and might their fear sometimes. And again, in regards to general condemnations of Iran's human rights, I think as my understanding is the majority of Iranians would like to see Iran being condemned because of this violation, but at the same time really doing something about it. Let's say, for example, a lot of times people align Iranian regime with its people, and then when they say this regime is a terrorist group or terrorist regime, a lot of people are worried that maybe it's actually referred to the people as well. And so this is sometimes something that they are feared, and they think that maybe this is leading to something worse. Maybe there could be something done in that regard that can actually ease their fears as well. And as being foreign affairs, two things that I could do. I mean, it's very hard really understanding the circumstances as being in that position, as well as obviously Canada's interest in many regards, because first thing is, one thing that maybe a minister has to do is really first taking into account the interest of the country, and then obviously in respect to the human rights condition. As we see in Iran was a major market for Canadian goods, especially Canadian wheat, but that it changed a lot because of the human rights condition, especially the case of Zahra Kazemi. So it affected diplomatic relations in many ways. So it really has to put it in the context of the situation at that time and at that place. But one of the things that I would really continue work very hard, because Canada is well respected, make sure that Iran, within the international set rules and regulations, like and the Human Rights Council and things like that, that Iran is continued to be monitored and continue to be condemned if needed, and as well as I think maybe as a foreign affairs, I would really put emphasis on maybe at the foreign affairs level, I would set up human rights as well, human rights monitoring groups, and as well as gathering that promotes human rights and a better understanding of Iran and Iranian culture. I think what the Canadian government has to do, I'm just suggesting really, is make sure that while they condemn the Iranians for their actions, the Iranian government, but also they need to be by the sides of the Iranian people. again, that's very political as well. But again, it has to be done with the context of the that time, and really the statement needs to be made. So that's what I would do.
All right. We're essentially out of time, Mr. Weston. We won't get any other business done today before our time expires. So if you have a further question, now's your opportunity.
Well, thank you. You spoke to questions 1 and 3, but what about empowering people like you and Nazanin? It just seems that in terms of our making a difference to the people in Iran, you have said we should continue doing what we're doing. I wonder whether the 300,000 people of Persian background, many of whom rejoiced when we recognized Nowruz, for instance, in the House of Commons recently, whether they would somehow be the ones to make a difference and help us really change the lives of Kurds and other minorities and other persecuted people in Iran.
Yeah, let me...
Just for the purposes of keeping order here, I'm going to see the clock as being at 3 minutes before 2. Please continue.
Okay, well, just on, sorry for skipping your second question. First of all, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Nazanin. So here you go. I mean, engaging Nazanin with these kind of activities definitely brought someone like me here, because Nazanin had referred another friend, and then kind of there was a connection of activists where I was able to attend here. So there is, I mean, that's helping in itself. So I might be able to get other organizations and activists who are able to maybe do other things. For example, Human Rights and Democracy, an organization, a parliamentary organization, I think it's funded by the Canadian government, can actually do a lot more on Iran in terms of maybe protecting women who actually are in dire needs, or maybe having giving them some resources to have access to lawyers, and maybe giving them educational materials, something like that in Afghanistan by the Human Rights and Democracy organization, a parliamentary. I think it's a Canadian. It's part of the Canadian Parliament, but it's an independent. But I think that we could also use that venue as well. As in regards to Nowruz, I think it was a good start, but I have one complaint, and it is that Iran is not only Persians, and I think in the statement is quite disturbing to a lot of Kurds who, and not only Iranians, but also Afghanis, and also I think it has to be amended to an extent, because we don't want to Nowruz is a new year, and it's celebrated not by just Persians, but also by Afghanis who do. Yes, they are Persians, but they call themselves Afghanis. By the Tajiks who live in the North Caucasus, by Kurds who live in Iraq. Kurds that live in Iraq are not. So even stating Iranians would actually offend a lot of peoples and not include everyone. So we don't have to just worry about the 300,000 Persians who live in Iran, in Canada or elsewhere, but we also have to think about the Kurds in Turkey who celebrate Nowruz. So I think we're, by that statement and officially recognizing that, we're actually excluding a lot of others, especially the Kurds in Turkey, who are about 20 million, the Kurds in Iraq, and other people who in the North, Caucasians, who actually celebrate Nowruz, like Azeris in the North. And so I think it has to be amended in two ways. One has you have to take out the Persian word, because it's not a Persian celebration. Yes, it is a Persian celebration, but it's other celebrations as well, and it's not solely an Iranian celebration. I think it has to refer to be Nowruz as a new year, and we have to celebrate, we have to congratulate, or have to put it in a word where everybody's included. I think that could be a start, and I think it's a good start to really officially recognize Nowruz.
Next year.
All right. Well, I want to thank our witness. It's been very interesting. You've packed a lot into the limited time that we had available for you to be here, and I think all of us appreciate it very, very much. It being 2 p.m., this subcommittee is now adjourned.